The cafeteria hummed with the sound of 100 overlapping conversations. But Rohan and Ananya operated in a private frequency. They sat at the corner table, the only place where the fluorescent office lights felt less clinical. Their fingers brushed against the ceramic rim of a single coffee cup, a small, habitual contact that anchored their morning. They were the office power couple, not by title, but by the way they finished each other's sentences during high-stakes meetings. Rohan watched Ananya trace a pattern on the table, her focus shifting from the spreadsheets on her laptop to the rhythm of his breathing. They shared a joke, a low-voiced observation about a colleague that made them both lean in, shutting out the rest of the room. It was a partnership built on years of shared late nights. When they walked back to their desks, they moved with a synchronized pace, a silent understanding that they were a team against the grind of the corporate floor. Rohan took his seat, his screen glowing with the day's tasks, but he kept his chair angled toward her cubicle. He watched her work, the way she tapped her pen when she hit a complex problem, and the way she looked up to catch his eye whenever she found the solution. It was a foundation of absolute trust, a quiet, steady warmth that defined every hour of their day. The atmosphere shifted when Mr. Khanna started lingering near Ananya's desk. It began with professional praise, but soon, the session stretched past 9 in the evening. Rohan watched from his cubicle, his own work forgotten as he tracked the changes. First, it was a leather-bound planner, then a designer scarf, and finally, a gold-plated watch that caught the light every time she moved her arm. One afternoon, Rohan walked over and pointed to the watch. "That is a beautiful piece," he said. Ananya did not look up from her monitor. "A friend gave it to me for my birthday," she replied, her tone clipped and dismissive. Rohan looked closer. He recognized the brand logo, the same one sold in the lobby boutique downstairs. The air between them grew thin. He watched her tap the watch against her desk, a rhythmic, metallic sound that seemed to signal a new rhythm he was no longer part of. She stopped joining him for lunch, leaving her desk empty at noon. When he tried to catch her gaze, she was already looking past him, her eyes fixed on the director's office. The foundation they had built together was cracking, replaced by the weight of things he could not name and lies he could not ignore. He sat back in his chair, the silence of his own cubicle suddenly deafening. The office environment turned hostile. During a high-stakes team meeting, Mr. Khanna cracked a joke that fell flat, yet Ananya erupted into loud, performative laughter. She leaned toward a colleague, her voice carrying just enough to reach Rohan's ears. "Some people are just content with staying in the same position forever," she said, her eyes flicking toward Rohan with sharp impatience. The room went still. Rohan felt the heat rise in his chest, but he did not speak. He looked down at his keyboard, his fingers moving with a sudden cold precision. He typed his resignation letter, the rhythmic clatter of keys the only sound he allowed himself to make. He did not look up when the meeting adjourned. He did not look up when Ananya walked past his desk, the metallic tapping of her watch against the wood serving as a final, jarring punctuation. Over the next 3 nights, he retreated to his apartment. He packed his belongings into cardboard boxes, methodically removing every shared photograph from the walls. He cleared the shelves of their history, leaving the space hollow. By the time he finished, the apartment felt like a stranger's room. He sat on the floor, the resignation letter printed and signed in his pocket, and stared at the dark screen of his phone. The bridge was burned. He was ready to leave. The park bench was cold. Rohan sat in the shadows, his hands buried deep in his pockets, feeling the sharp edge of the envelope containing his flight ticket. When Ananya arrived, she was breathless, her eyes darting to her phone every few seconds. She did not sit. Rohan stood up, the movement slow and deliberate. He pulled the envelope out, but he did not hand it to her. "I saw the watch, Ananya," he said, his voice steady, cutting through the rustle of the leaves. "And I saw you leaving the office with him at midnight last Tuesday." The color drained from her face. She reached out, her fingers brushing his arm in a reflexive gesture of habit, but he stepped back, creating a distance she could not bridge. "You did not just choose a better career path," he continued, his tone devoid of anger, replaced by a final, chilling clarity. You chose to lie to the person who stood by you when you had nothing, she stammered, her hands trembling as she reached for his sleeve again. Rohan, it was just a game. He has connections. I can fix this. Rohan shook his head, the motion small and absolute. You cannot fix a foundation built on deception. He turned his back on her, walking toward the park exit without looking back. A month later, the office air felt thin. The news of Mr. Khanna's sudden transfer rippled through the cubicles, leaving behind a wake of broken promises. Ananya sat at her desk, the silence around her heavy and absolute. She stared at the empty chair across the aisle, where Rohan used to sit. The space was vacant, stripped of his presence and his work. She reached for her wrist, a reflexive gesture, but her fingers met only bare skin. The watch was gone. She looked down at the desk, at the reports piled high, and the cold reality settled in. She had traded a genuine connection for a temporary climb. The office hummed, but for her, the room was hollow. She sat motionless, the silence the only thing remaining.